diaper girl, and
Excellent.
Yeah, it's fun. Oh, there's Drew is here too.
Oh, hey, Drew.
So okay, so well, do you want to get started?
Sure.
Let's get started, Garrett.
Let's
Why don't
do
we
it.
get started? I'll kind of hand over it to you, and you can just chat away. And please, if anybody has any questions, just holler out, and I'll throw them up on the screen. If that you want to do that, Garrett, just as they come in, if there's something there.
Sounds good.
There's
That's
Doug
hard
is
to do
here
with a
too.
mirror.
Huh?
I was trying to do thumbs up, but I'm like mirrored, so it's weird to get both of them in.
Yeah.
There we go. Success.
Yeah. Nice. All right, so let's get started. Garrett, take it away.
All right. So I'm going to talk about niche podcasting. And I say that because we have a dinosaur podcast called Know Dino. But if we gave a talk about dinosaur podcasting, it would only be relevant to us pretty much. So instead, I'm going to try to expand on what we do. And hopefully, if you have a podcast, which is something that's not really broad, I guess even if it is broad, some of it might apply. But yeah. And I'm going to focus on traveling, because that's something that I haven't really seen in these talks recently. So things we have talked about recently. So Sean Howard was talking about crowdfunding, mostly focused on Patreon. I think that is probably the best option for podcasters because it gives you a recurring revenue stream. And since we make a recurring product, it just fits nicely. Things like Kickstarter, you get money once, which I think could work pretty well if you're doing like a seasonal sort of episode or episodic thing. But if you're doing just like a weekly podcast, Kickstarter is kind of a weird, it doesn't seem like a great fit. Same with Indiegogo. But yeah, so Patreon's great. We use it. But if you want to learn more about that, you should just watch Sean Howard's talk on it because it was excellent. He has this cool dashboard that we started using after seeing his talk. It's very helpful. Yeah. So I'm going to focus on two other elements of community, the social platforms and live events. So social platforms are things like Discord or Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter. There's a million of them out there. I think some are a lot better than others. My favorite right now is Discord for quite a few reasons I'll get into. And then live events can be both digital and in person. So some of the things that you could do right now are things like watch parties or game streams. But then there's also a lot of in-person stuff you can do, which I'm going to get into. Hopefully you can eventually do them too once this whole lockdown is ended. So I'm going to start with the digital stuff because that's the easiest stuff. After you set up your crowdfunding, the next thing to do, I think, is to try to create a big online community. You might even do it before you set up crowdfunding. So with a niche audience, you're going to have to use more than one place, I think, because say with dinosaurs, you've got a lot of paleontologists that are on Twitter, but there's a lot of dinosaur enthusiasts which are on Facebook. So if we were only on one or the other, it's really hard to reach our full audience. So we found that we had to go in lots of places. And then for Instagram, that's a great place for us to post pictures of dinosaurs or dinosaur museums and things like that. And we can draw in the visual inclined people that way. Yeah, so every site kind of has its own style, and you might want to do all of them or pick a few which fit your audience the best. We do all of these. Sabrina is great at doing social media stuff. She does most of it. I do the Discord and some of the other channels that are a little more technical like Reddit. But yeah, it's a great place to go find new listeners and also communicate with your listeners. But really what you want to do, the best sort of online community are ones where members can talk to each other. So that is why I like Discord so much, because Discord is a more or less a chat room. It's kind of like Slack if you've used that. And what ends up happening is it's a much richer conversation than you get if, say, you just post something on Facebook and you get responses to it, or someone emails you. So, for example, I'm going to not use dinosaurs because I'm going to talk about dinosaurs too much. Say you have a Star Trek podcast and somebody emails you or sends you a message on Facebook and says, do you remember the episode where Spock, blah, 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 blah? You could respond to it and say, oh, yeah, I think it's this episode. And that's pretty much where the conversation dies. And it's helpful to them, but it's not really a great conversation. It's not doing a ton for you. But if you have that on something like Discord, someone posts, hey, does anybody remember the episode where this happened? Then somebody replies, yeah, I think that's in this episode. And there's also this other episode which is relevant and it informs some of the things that happen there. And then somebody else jumps in with some other comments, and it just evolves a lot more, and it's a lot more engaging. And the people get to hang out with each other and not just message you, which is good if you don't have all of your time to spend on this, but it also just makes it more fun for everybody. So I've had a lot more fun on Discord than in like Instagram and Facebook direct messages. It's just a much more enjoyable place to be. And then eventually you might want to limit the number of channels that people can message you directly on. So right now we're starting to get a little bit overwhelmed by getting messages in all these places, and we're trying to figure out which ones to turn off. So pretty soon it'll probably be like you can message us on Discord or tweet at us, and that might be about it, because yeah, you want to have this community where people talk to each other rather than just talking at you all the time. Once you have that, so it makes it so much easier to bring in new interactive things with your community. So here's our example of our movies channel that we started just a few weeks ago for watch parties. So what I will say is I think anytime you're starting a new live event of any type, you should pick something that you enjoy, because then worst case scenario, you're doing something you enjoy by yourself if nobody shows up. Best case scenario, you have a really fun time with a bunch of your listeners, but yeah, you know, you might as well just watch something you enjoy. So we started out, we watched Jurassic Park, then we watched Jurassic Park 2, then 3, then Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and then most recently we watched Land Before Time. That's what you can see here. So on the right there, there's the pinned messages. I wonder if I go over this. No, you can't see what I'm doing. Oh yeah, you can. So there's these pinned messages you can pin in a Discord channel. And in this case, what we did was we said, hey, we're going to watch this movie. We're going to watch it at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And this is the frame that we're going to all press play exactly at the top of the hour. And everybody do that. Come into this Discord movies channel, and we'll all watch together and comment with each other. And it works great. It was a ton of fun every time we've done it. And then since we ran out of movies that we really wanted to watch, we started doing polls. So we have this poll for what movie we'll watch next. And I think it's going to be Dinosaur, the Disney movie from 2000, because that seems like the most popular one. So that was really awesome. I will say, I don't think you should stream the video. The reason that we have the sync point is because I think it's illegal to stream the movie itself unless you have rights to do that kind of thing. So instead, we just say, everybody watch on your own devices and talk together in this channel. And it's been awesome. People love it. We've had a lot of patrons that actually joined specifically to get into this movies channel on our Discord, since the Discord channel is only for our patrons. That's what all these little lock symbols mean, is that you have to be a patron to get into it. We also tried some other channels in here. We did a game server, which wasn't nearly as popular as the movie channel. I thought it would be more popular because there are a lot of dinosaur-based video games, and some of them are online, so you can play together. But it's really cheap. It's like $10 a month. So it's easy to experiment with these things. You can just try different things, see if it builds a community, if people are interested in joining you online with things that you like to do too. And if it works, it's really a win-win, because it's like, well, I like playing dinosaur video games. If people want to play with me in this online environment on my Patreon Discord server, then it's perfect. It works great. It's really a win for everybody. So if you're going to do online streaming too, this is the tools we use in case you're interested. This software here is called OBS. I think it stands for Open Broadcasting System Service, something like that. It's free. It's cross-platform, so it's on Linux and Windows and Mac OS, and it's got all the features you could want. So what you can see in this thing, these are like different windows you can put up. You can put your logo in the corner. You can have a little like scroll bar on the bottom saying when people donate to you, if you include a donate button. A lot of game streamers will do that. We do ours on YouTube, but you could do it on Twitch. I think there's more people on Twitch, but the reason we do YouTube is that community thing again. So on YouTube, we post every podcast episode. We just do it with a single static image, but we do it so that when people are searching YouTube for something dinosaur related, our podcast might pop up and we can find more of these niche audience members. And then in every episode, we say, subscribe to our podcast. And then a lot of times we'll put a comment in YouTube saying, if you really want to get the latest episodes on time, because we delay the YouTube launch so that people don't necessarily, go there instead of our podcast, because we prefer that they listen to us through an RSS feed. We delay it a little bit. And yeah, so it can be a way to sort of bring people into your channel. And for that reason, we use YouTube. I think it's probably the best option for most podcasters. But if another thing to keep in mind is if you're doing PC game streaming, it's the easiest. But if you're using like a Nintendo Switch or something, it may not have the built-in capability to stream the way you want to. A lot of the new consoles do have that ability, but if you don't have it, you might have to buy something like this. This is a HD Pro, it's called. It's by a company named Elgato, and you can just plug any HDMI thing into it, and then this plugs into a computer, and you can stream out whatever HDMI content you're playing on. And yeah, the only other stuff you need is stuff you probably already have, like microphone gear that you have for recording a podcast, possibly a webcam if you want to be in it. I don't usually use a webcam though. All right, so that's game streaming, another way to grow a community. So moving on to traveling, because it was really surprising how much this actually helped us with our podcast. So just in general though, traveling has a lot of great benefits. Obviously, it's super enjoyable, especially if you like traveling. You get to pick places you want to go, and I think you should only pick places you want to go. I don't recommend traveling to places just because you think it might be a good place to find some new audience members, but you don't think you're going to like it, because in the early days, especially when you're traveling and running a podcast, you don't have a ton of extra money. So if you're kind of combining it with a vacation, or at least picking a place that's enjoyable for you, you're not going to be super upset when you don't make a bunch of money and don't get a ton of new listeners by going there. So anyway, that's just my number one recommendation. The biggest benefits, though, are that you make stronger connections. This is both to your listeners, but also to all of the other people who might be tangentially related to your podcast. So that includes sponsors, people that you could collaborate with if you want to do a crossover podcast episode or get featured in some project that they're working on, or vice versa. And then also in-person interviews are always by far the best. You get a better sound quality by interviewing them in person, but a lot of times also the people you're interviewing in person will open up a little bit more. You can see where they actually are. And in the case of dinosaurs, that means like you get to see their lab, which is really fun, but also they'll show you things. And then when you're on the show, you can say, oh, you just showed me this. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And you make a little bit better of a connection with them. The crazy part, though, is, at least to me, we learned a ton by traveling around that we did not expect at all. There's so much that you learn when you're out physically in the community, talking to people who are in that community, that you just wouldn't find out by going online, or it might take much, much longer to find out online. So I definitely recommend traveling if you can. I guess once we can. So real quick though, some of the traveling hardware you might want to get as a podcaster. This is true even if you're just traveling for other reasons and want to keep your podcast up. Say you have to go on a business trip unrelated to a podcast. Most of the stuff you probably already have. This stuff over here, headphones, a microphone, some interface. If all you're doing is podcasting, there's a good chance that you can just move your stuff along with you in a laptop and record. But if you're going to do interviewing, I highly recommend getting something like the Zoom H5 if you don't already have it. If you have this device, it allows you to record without lugging around a laptop with you. So basically, this thing here on the bottom has two XLR inputs. So you can do a one-on-one interview with independent channels. So each of you have your own mic. And then if you add this thing, they call it a capsule. it plugs into this top part where the mics are. It gives you 2 more XLR inputs that also have separate channels. So when Sabrina and I do our podcasts, we'll each have our own microphone, and then we can interview 2 other people, give them a microphone to hold, 1 each, and we'll all be on individual channels, which makes it much easier to edit, makes everything sound way better, and it's excellent. If you're going to do that, I also highly recommend the Shure SM58 microphone. It is basically like the gold standard for any kind of live work. It's a dynamic mic, so it cuts out a lot of the background noise, which is great if you're at a noisy place, which you usually are when you're on the go. It's really light, so your interviewees don't complain about how heavy it is, because like this is the mic we bring. We have 2 of these SM58s, but we bring along our 2 Rode Procasters, which are what we got 5-6 years ago when we started the podcast, and they're really heavy. So we tried giving them to people to hold, and they weren't great at it. They end up dropping the mic away from their mouth, and then you have to try to fix it in post, and it's not great. The SM58 is much more durable and reliable for people who are not experienced with using microphones like we are. It also doesn't need a preamp. So when I travel, we have to bring along this thing called a FEThead. It's a company name. It's written on here in little tiny letters, FETHEAD. It's the same as a cloud lifter you might be familiar with. If you have phantom power coming out of the XLR input, which the Zoom H5 can do on these 2, it can't do them on the top 2. It'll give you more gain. So it works like a preamp, just a simple transistor preamp. And this one is clean enough that it doesn't need those. So also, again, really useful. If you need more than 4 channels, you should get the Zoom H6. It has 4 XLR inputs, and then again, you can add this little doohickey to the top and get up to 6, which should be enough. If you have a podcast with more than 6 people, it's probably going to sound a little crazy. I don't know anyone who does that, but yeah, there's a solution for you definitely out there. And I think this is the best way to do it. We've done it for years on many trips, recording with just the Zoom H5, a few XLR cords, a few mics, and a headphone, and that's it. And you can just plop down anywhere and do a real quick interview. It's great. And oh yeah, one more thing to note. When you're traveling, make sure you take lots of pictures. I didn't include a camera on this because odds are your cell phone camera can suffice. But if you have a better camera, I would bring it along. When we're in museums that are poorly lit, it's great to have a nicer camera because pictures are incredibly useful for social media. So our first trip I'm going to start with for our podcast, we did this trip about a year after we started, maybe a year and a few months. We decided there was this new museum called the Philip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum in northern Alberta, Canada. It looked amazing. This is a picture of the outside of it. It won a bunch of architecture awards. We were huge fans of the man named Philip J. Currie. He's a really famous Canadian paleontologist. And so we wanted to see his museum. And then we thought, well, as long as we're going to rural northern Alberta, Canada, it's very hard to get to. We might as well plan sort of a podcasting trip around it and see what we can accomplish. So we did. And we did it because we like road trips and we wanted to see some dinosaur stuff. Again, I think you should start with what you like to do and not what you think might help, because again, this trip was pretty expensive even though we were driving. And yeah, so definitely do something you want to do. The results of this trip were actually really surprising. So we visited 4 major museums. This D way up here is where we were going for, that's near Grand Prairie, Alberta. I think it snowed a week before we got there, and we got there around the 4th of July. That's how far north it is. It was pretty crazy. And everybody who saw us there with our California license plates assumed that we were driving to Alaska. We were like, no, this is as far as we go. We're turning around and going back down to the US because we're just here for the dinosaurs. There's also a dinosaur museum at this E point, F point, and G point, which were all, we just included along the way, and it made it a little more reasonable. If we had driven all the way there just for one thing, it probably wouldn't have been worth it. But since we combined some other stops, it made it a lot better. And at F, we also did a dinosaur dig, which was really cool. The thing about the dinosaur dig was we weren't like really excited about doing a dinosaur dig, but we've talked to so many paleontologists that have done dinosaur digs by the time we did this road trip that we just wanted to experience it, so that when we're talking to our listeners about, hey, this is what a dinosaur dig is like, or this is what they found while digging, we wanted some context for it. And it was super helpful. So I think anytime you can get out there and really directly experience more of what your podcast is about, I think it's worthwhile. So if you have, say you have a podcast about movies, if you can get to a movie set so that you can see what the filming process is like, I think it can't hurt. It's going to help you talk more intelligently to your audience about the subject. What else do I want to share here? Oh yeah. When we went to these dinosaur museums, the biggest benefit was, we thought, I should say the biggest benefit we were expecting is that we would get a ton of pictures from these museums and some interviews, and we would use all that content to promote the show and to just make the show better, because we would have these great in-person interviews with paleontologists, some of whom are hard to get in person or without being in person. And we definitely did those things. But the craziest thing was we got a museum sponsor, which we weren't expecting. Right before we left, we realized, oh, we should talk to the marketing people at these museums and see if maybe they want to advertise on our show, and it could offset a little bit of the cost of our trip. And it actually worked out. One of the museums we stopped at became a sponsor. It took a little while, so it wasn't like it funded the trip while we were on it. But over the next couple of years, we had them, they sponsored the show several times. And I think in the end, it probably paid for more than the amount of travel that we had, or travel expenses that we had. So it really worked out in a pretty major way. So if you can connect with people who have a marketing budget when you're traveling, definitely reach out to them. It helps if you can do it in advance, but we didn't reach out to them in advance. We really should have. So at every museum, we didn't get a chance to talk to marketing people because we just didn't organize it properly. Definitely reach out in advance if you can, but it still worked out. So we got kind of lucky on that one. The other really big thing, though, was we learned about this thing called SVP, which stands for the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. And it's the kind of conference that you only know about if you're really deep into dinosaurs or vertebrate paleontology. And that's how we went this long without finding out about it. But when we were talking to paleontologists in person, they all mentioned stories from this conference, because everybody's got a story about, like, oh, we were out late drinking and then I had to get up at 8 a.m. for a talk and whatever. So you get these crazy stories, and then you're like, oh, we need to get to this conference because it's where all the paleontologists are. So cue our second, third, and fourth trips. They were all to the Society for Vertebrate Paleontology, where we interviewed paleontologists, and we also schedule a lot of future interviews. The great thing about going to these in-person events, whether it's a conference or it's just a meetup with people who you might be interested in having on your show, is that you get to see how well they speak in person and if they'd be a good fit as a guest on your show, assuming you have guests on your show. Because especially with something like paleontology, and I'm sure a lot of people's podcasts are like this, where you read about what people think and you read about their opinions or other posts that they have online, but you don't see how well they can carry a thought for a long period of time and how eloquent they are, which is super important when you're making a podcast. So literally what I would do is I would go into these, I still do, go into these SVP meetings, and there are a bunch of 15-minute long talks that you watch, and I would have notes. I'd be like, this guy's a great speaker. He's really engaging. He's really interesting. I want to have him on the show. Or she's got this new idea that I haven't heard before, and it contrasts with something that somebody else might have said. Maybe I could have them on together. All sorts of things like that. You come up with all these ideas when you see people in person talking, and it is invaluable. So even if you can't interview them while you're there, you might be able to schedule something with them in the future, which is great. The other thing that we started to notice when we went to these meetups or meetings, not meetups, is that we started seeing some fans of our show, and we would also tell people about our show. We started bringing a bunch of stickers with us so we could hand them out and say, hey, we've got this podcast. It's about dinosaurs. You're almost certainly interested in dinosaurs because you're at this conference. Check it out. So it's sort of a guerrilla marketing type thing where you're just promoting your show to people. And you get to see the success stories. You get to meet people. We met people who said, I became a paleontologist or I'm studying paleontology because I heard your show, and I wouldn't be at this conference unless you mentioned it to me. And it really motivates you to keep working. It's nice when you get the messages like that in email, but when you actually meet a person in real life and you appreciate that this person actually listens to you every week or every month or however often your show comes out and really absorbs what you're saying and appreciates it, it's a fantastic feeling. And I think it's a big upside to traveling. But for us, what we ended up using SVP for was sort of a rallying cry for our patrons. Every year, it happens in the fall, and leading up to the fall, so starting in the summer, we start telling our patrons, hey, if you join our Patreon, by the time we go on this meeting, we'll send you something. And we tried sending a few different gifts. We tried doing tiers and things like that. But what we ended up settling on is this card store thing. And that's basically a postcard where you fill it out online. You can make a different cover for the postcard every year. You can fully customize it, and you can put the text built in on the back so you don't have to address it, and they'll address them all and send them all over the world. And the postage was reasonable, but unfortunately this company just went bankrupt or closed for some other reason. So I got to find somebody else who would do this because it's great. And I think people really appreciate getting physical stuff once in a while. It doesn't have to be something huge, but we get a lot of messages back that are like, thank you so much for that card. It was awesome. Some people are, they're having a bad day and it really brightens their mood, or they just really appreciate that you took the time to mail them something when they're not getting a lot of stuff in the mail that they like to get. So yeah, that's super helpful. And then, like I said, we use it as a rallying cry. So leading up to it, we'll say, hey, we're going to go to this thing. It's thousands of miles away. We're going to have to pay for a hotel, all that stuff. If you can join our Patreon, it'll really help us get there. We're going to share tons of information that we learn while we're at this event with you. And if you could help us out by joining our Patreon, it would really help us, to deliver all that content to you. And a lot of people really do respond to that. Not everybody is looking to give you money to get something back. Some people just want to know that they're helping you do something that they care about. And they care about you, so they're willing to give you some money. And it is awesome. We love all of our patrons. So this trip that we did to Australia, this was our 5th trip, and it blew all the other trips out of the water in terms of complexity and scale, because we had to go to Australia for it. And since we were going to Australia, we figured, well, while we were there, we might as well really just go nuts and try to see as much of the country as possible. It's like a 2-day flight practically to get there, so you might as well make the most of it. So the reason we picked Australia this year or last year is because SVP was there, and we pretty much always go to SVP now. It was in Brisbane, and that turned out to be our best meetup. So this is the people that we met in Brisbane for our meetup in Brisbane. We did meetups in lots of major cities around Australia, I guess all the major cities except for Perth. And the one that we had next to SVP was by far the biggest. It was much bigger than Sydney or Melbourne, which have way bigger populations than Brisbane, but it's that element of the niche audience. So there were a bunch of dinosaur enthusiasts right there with us. So we put a tweet on Twitter and said, hey, we're going to be at this restaurant in like 3 hours. If you want to go there and like get a drink with us and talk about dinosaurs, please do. And like 6 or 7 people showed up just to hang out with us. It was really cool. And on top of that, I guess we should have probably planned this in advance. Maybe next time we'll schedule some much larger events. But when you're doing a meetup like this, it's just a great way to connect with the audience that's already there, because they really appreciate getting to see you. They've been listening to you probably for years, hearing your voice, and being able to give you some direct feedback is great. Just on a personal note, our trip through Australia, we started in Brisbane. We flew up to Townsville, and then we drove basically straight out into the outback, and all this solid line was a drive that we did through the outback until we got to Sydney and then Canberra, Melbourne, and Canberra. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And the reason we did this whole crazy drive was somebody at this middle point in a museum in a city called Aramanga invited us out there, and it was a new museum, and we're suckers for new museums. So we went out to this place, and it was amazing. It was a great experience. I don't think if we didn't love doing this, we would have done it because, again, it's really expensive. But we did meet a lot of new people, and we got some leads on potential new sponsors. It took us 17 days to drive the 3,000 miles. We took breaks in between to edit the show and also record new shows because we basically were doing them live, or on a weekly basis. We didn't pre-record the way we could have, because this way we could cover SVP. So yeah, it's possible. It's doable. Anyone can do it with the motivation. Some results from this 5th trip, because it was on such a different scale. We visited a bunch more museums, which means lots more social media material. Our biggest Instagram photo was just some random dinosaur sculpture we found at a rural museum, and it got us hundreds of new Instagram followers just taking a picture of this thing. That's why I was saying taking pictures, posting them on your account for your niche audience is hugely important. We also created some videos. It was the first time we had done that. It didn't go quite as well as we hoped it would. I think we have a lot of things to learn in terms of videos. We don't know how to get them to catch on. We're audio people. But if you're good at videos, or your podcast is related to some obviously good video content and you have some passion for it, while traveling, that's a great time to make some videos because you're out there and seeing lots of new stuff. You can buy these little steady cams. We bought one for, I think, like $80. It holds your smartphone and it lets you do all sorts of really great looking shots really easily. We also bought a drone. That's what we took this picture with. I mostly just wanted a drone and convinced Sabrina, hey, it's a good idea to get one because we're going to be in Australia. But it wasn't as useful as I had hoped because there's lots of restrictions on where you can fly drones. But this is a picture of Aramanga, which is, they call it the farthest city from the sea. It's a city of 30 people, and the nearest anything is like 70 miles away. So yeah, it was a cool picture. We couldn't have gotten any other way. But the best thing about our trip to Australia definitely was meeting with lots of listeners all over the place and getting insight about what they like about our show, what they don't like about our show. Every time I ask them, hey, what do you think about the audio quality in our early episodes? Because it drives me crazy. And every time I ask a listener that, they always say, I don't care. It's a free podcast. What are you going to do? I just turn the volume up. If it's too quiet, people really don't care as much as I think they do. And getting that kind of direct feedback is really great. And it's also just fun to meet your listeners because they're into the thing you're into. Otherwise, they wouldn't be listening to your podcast. So it's amazing to just meet these people all over the world who are interested in the same things as you. It's awesome. So some questions that I think might be useful for making your own content better is, have you made your online community? If not, make one. I recommend Discord. I think it's great because, especially if you're using Patreon, you can give either bonus like rooms for them to chat in, or you can give them special flair. Like you can like change the color of their name. People care about that kind of thing. Or you can do what we do, which is basically make the Discord patron only. And part of the benefit to that is you don't get any trolls because everybody knows who everybody is. It's not anonymous, and they've put their money down to get into the group, so they're not there to just like start fights about nothing. It also, if you have any way you can come up with, you should be interacting with your community as much as you possibly can right now, because everybody out there is starving for more attention. Maybe not everybody. Some people are getting overwhelmed with all the Zoom calls and everything. But there are a lot of people out there who are living alone, they're self-isolating alone, and they are looking for a community to join and have fun with that isn't just talking about coronavirus all the time. So if you can, do something like a watch party. If you like playing video games and they're relevant to what you're doing on your podcast, do some live streams or create a server for people to join you in. You could do contests. Like you could say, hey, everybody, send me your art on the topic of your podcast and we'll share our favorite one. Or, we'll give you a $20 gift card if you win, or whatever kind of thing you're interested in doing, something to engage with the audience. You could also do a live stream Q&A session, or like an AMA like they do on Reddit, where people just post questions to you and you can try to answer them, hopefully. Anything you can come up with to interact with your audience more is great. Right now it's limited to online, unfortunately, but yeah, definitely try to do as much of that as you possibly can. Once you can get out into the real world, you want to try to meet your group in person. So I think the first place to look for that is if there's already an existing event that's going on. So for us, once we found out there was a thing called SVP, we were like, we're sold. We got to get there. It's a thing that happens every year. If you're doing some kind of nerdy, culture podcast, you should be going to places like Dragon Con or Comic Con to meet up with your listeners and people who are interested in the same topics as you. And when you go, bring some merchandise that you can give out, like stickers or business cards. Maybe we use like business stickers. We print our social media information and our email address and stuff on the back of our sticker, and we hand those out instead. So they do like a double duty. They're both a business card and sort of a promotional material. So I would recommend those if you need something to hand out at events. And if you can't find an event, there might be some other sort of natural meeting place that you can bring people to. So for us, that's a museum, for example. We can say, hey, we're going to go to this museum. People, please join us. And I think that would work out well. Or you could create your own event, which we have not successfully done, but I know Drew has done it. He's made the Sleep With Me live, where people come in and they sleep, which I think is the most amazing idea and one of the most clever ways to integrate a podcast with a live event. And if Drew can come up with a way for a podcast where you fall asleep listening to it to do a live event, you can come up with an idea for your podcast where you have a live event. So yeah, it's out there. Just be creative, try stuff. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work, start in a local place that's cheap or free, give it a shot, see if people come. If they don't, there's no downside. If they do, your audience is growing, you're getting a bigger community, and everything's fantastic. So yes, that is the end of my presentation. Here's a picture of Sabrina and I getting married at our dinosaur-themed wedding.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions about any of that stuff.
Was that the officiant?
No, that's just a guy in a dinosaur suit. But that thing is like, what was it? It was like 20 feet long or something. It's got a whole tail and a whole body sticking out off the back of that screen.
Super cool. You guys are so dinosaur-y. So I had some questions.
Sure.
We'll wait for other questions because people will come in. So the Discord thing, so you have the watch party. So do you send out, like, my thing was like, you do all the social media stuff. You're sending them all to your website, or you're sending them to listen to the podcast? How does it, is that even a thing anymore? A meeting place for where you're always sending people?
So for our watch parties, since those kind of do a double thing for us, because it's a channel in our Discord, which is walled off to only our patrons. So the communication is basically like, if you want to watch this movie with us, join our Patreon and then go into the Discord server and comment with us.
Very cool.
But other times, like when we do game live streams, we just do that over YouTube. So then we'll just post on like Twitter, and we'll mention it usually on the podcast. It's actually a great time to have dynamic ad insertions like we were talking about. I think Heather was talking about with Art 19 and all them. Because then you can just go and right when you're about to do it, you can have it push out to everybody and say, in 2 days, I'm going to do a live stream on YouTube or on Twitch or whatever, and get people that way. Oh, that's the name of the dinosaur that was at our wedding, was Duncan the dinosaur.
Duncan. Great. That's so funny. Let's see. Drew has a question. you work with an accountant for expenses? How does writing off a trip like that work?
Oh man, that's a whole thing. So for us, I do all of our taxes because I kind of like doing taxes because I'm a weirdo.
Yeah, you
But
are.
yeah, so if you're doing the podcast as like a sole proprietorship, which a lot of podcasters do, and you're writing off your expenses, you can write off your business expenses for traveling. We do. It's perfectly fine to do. When we went to Australia, we did a side trip to New Zealand after the fact. So that part wasn't a write off. It was only the part while we were in Australia, obviously, and going to different museums. Yeah, but you're allowed to write that off. The IRS has all this documentation about what you're allowed to write off and what you're not. It basically boils down to if you're doing it primarily as a business trip, you can write off the travel expenses, and there's like a meal allowance, and or you can write off the actual expenses of your meals and vehicle and all that kind of stuff.
So you couldn't find any dinosaur museums in New Zealand?
I think there's one, but we just after like a month of dinosaurs, we just wanted to relax. So we decided
any more dinosaurs.
yeah, we were like, let's not this time. Let's not. There was like one museum, but it wasn't the city we were staying in. We were staying in Auckland, and it was in another city. And we are like, we could fly there just for a day and fly back. And we're like, oh no, it's not worth it.
No. So how are you like vetting this stuff? Are you at all like what's working, what isn't? Are you like just, throwing stuff against the wall and then going, okay, well, that bumped our numbers, or how are you doing some kind of measurement for this stuff?
So the main reason that I recommend doing stuff you enjoy is because it's not all going to work. Some things just aren't going to stick, and you want it to be something that if it does stick, you're okay with continuing to do over and over again, at least in my opinion, because we're all doing podcasting, not because it's the most lucrative thing. We're doing it because we enjoy it. So yeah, I like playing dinosaur video games. So I figured I'll just give that a shot and see how it goes. There's a good chance that, so this channel here that says Arc Game Chat, that's for a server that I run. I just pay like $10 a month for a few people at a time can play this online game called Ark, where you can like raise dinosaurs and stuff. But
that's
it's
great.
it's not really that popular though. That's one that didn't really take off. So I might at the end of the year say like, okay guys, I'm going to either cancel it or maybe I'll switch it over to a different game or, try something else. The game live streams too weren't super popular, and it's a little bit more work than I expected. It's kind of hard to talk nonstop while you're playing a video game. It's not as enjoyable as I thought it would be.
And you're really talking though, right? I mean, it's not typing, you're talking.
Yeah, you have to talk a lot when you're live streaming. It's harder than people think. So yeah, I haven't done too much of that. But these movies were really popular. I didn't expect them to be as popular as they were, but since they're really popular, it's like, okay, we'll watch them. And we'll just keep going until people get bored of it or whatever. It doesn't really matter. You can, and obviously you can just stop at any time too and say like, we're going to take a break from doing these. People understand that you can't do everything all the time.
Yeah. And then, so how are you like deciding when to do those? Is it like, how many people are coming in and doing that? Is it like 10 people or?
Yeah, so for our Patreon, I think we've got about 150 patrons now, and
that's great.
Yeah, it's actually grown a fair amount in the last couple months too, which is really nice. But I think only like half of them about go on our Discord server. I'm always trying to get everybody in there because I think it's just the best. I want everybody in there all the time because I really do enjoy talking to them in all these different forums. So yeah, about half of them are in there. When we watched Jurassic Park, I think maybe 20 people watched with us, which was awesome. I didn't expect that many people to join. And then as we got through the series, it was kind of less and less people because the movies aren't, none of them are good as the original. So it just kind of like faded off. And then Land Before Time, we only had a few people join, but we love that movie, Sabrina and I. So we're like, whatever, we're going to watch Land Before Time because we want to. If you don't want to watch it, you don't have to. And then, so we'll see for this next one now that we're getting off more into the weeds of dinosaur movies. And if we consistently are getting less than, say, maybe 2 or 3 people, we'll probably just stop. But at the same time, we know that people have joined recently just to watch movies with us. So
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
like there was, and I think one of them was even like a husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend, where one of them was watching and the other person wanted to join so they could also comment, and they joined like while we were watching the movie to get in and talk to us. So I think that one caught on pretty well. Some of the other ones are a little harder to track, but with Sean's Fable and Folly, where he put up his hidden Patreon dashboard and you can see how the different categories are growing. If you segment out different things, you can really see like, oh, people really love Discord. And you can see when we created our Discord channel, all the things just started growing. Everything that has a Discord perk in it.
Interesting. Yeah, I had heard of Discord. I'd never used it till you told me about it. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think that we should do that with the group too. So when you go to events, like I remember going to events too with my old podcast, I would always go and have a meetup, and it always really worked well. You're right. When you said that, I was like, yeah, that is something that if you can do that, people are looking for, especially if they're podcast listeners, they're, and then they'll bring their friends. You always meet more people.
Yeah.
At the
Yeah, that was really great. And it was also really helpful for us kind of at the beginning of that road trip, because when you're meeting all these people in person, they'd say stuff like, oh, you're going on a road trip. Are you going to go to this place? And you just get tips that, you're not going to get any other way than if you're meeting with people. So, and they know what you're interested in because they've been listening, they've listened to you for hundreds or thousands of hours. So they know so much about you that they're really quick to help you out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Drew had a question. Is that for all levels on Patreon?
Yeah, it is. So the way our Patreon is basically set up now is all of our Discord stuff, everything that's in here is for everybody at every tier. And our lowest tier is $4. We got rid of our $1 and $2 tiers a couple years ago, basically because Patreon said, if people will give you $1 or $2, they'll usually give you $3. And then we decided to go to $4. I don't know why. I can't remember why at the time we decided that. But then we also grandfathered in, because you could like kick people out when you get rid of a tier, but we don't do that. We just left the people who are at the $1 and $2 tiers and gave them everything that's in the $4 tier as well. So yeah, every patron that we have can go to all of these things. And then we have higher tiers. For $8, we'll give people a shout out. At $10, you get an ad-free episode. And then in a couple months, we'll probably start doing a bonus episode for everybody at the $10 level too. And then we have a $20 level where we give out books. But really, we do have maybe too much stuff at the lower tiers, because like Sean was talking about, like once people are joining it at a good rate, stop adding stuff to it, was one of his pieces of advice. And I wish I had seen that before setting up some of this Patreon stuff, because I think we might have put too much stuff in the $4 tier, because that's definitely the most popular one now.
And you guys wrote books, you said.
Yeah. Sabrina's written quite a few books about dinosaurs and various dinosaurs.
Did you get like a signed book, or is that the thing, or is it?
We did that once. Yeah, we did that as one. What were we doing? We decided we were going to give out some beta readers of a book, which is basically like to get feedback in the early phases. And so we gave it out, I think, to every patron who was interested in it, or maybe even every listener. But then we decided, since we were giving out this book for free and the $20 tier is supposed to be you get every book we publish, it might have undercut it. So we said, okay, we're going to mail everybody at that tier a signed copy when it comes out, or a physical copy. I can't remember if we signed them. So yeah.
Interesting. Doug has a question. Is Discord particularly good as a film playing facilitation, or is it the playback localized, as you said before?
Yeah, so we don't stream it through there. I think there is a streaming capability in Discord, just like you can do in like YouTube and a lot of like the thing we're using right now, Facebook. But yeah, we don't stream it because we don't have the copyright and we don't have the rights to stream it. So we just post like this, like a little snapshot where it's like, go to this point in the movie. We were going to do a timestamp, but it doesn't work because Netflix versus a DVD versus like if you're streaming somewhere else, they'll have different front stuff. So it'll the times will be different. So you have to like really sync to an image basically. So I just took a picture of my screen and put that up like a week in advance.
Seems like you could watch Jurassic Park again. You could really. I mean, that's one of those ones you can watch every. I mean, I can too. I'm not like a big dinosaur fan, but
it's true.
Seems like you could do it every 6 months or something. Hey, we're going to do our annual Jurassic Park watching.
That's a good point. And the first time we watched it, we did it. I looked at our patrons and I thought we would have more people joining in like the AP time zone, but so we did it like late at night so that they could watch it kind of midday the next day. But then I don't think anybody joined from there. So later on we switched to watching it in the afternoon here so that people in Europe could watch too. And we didn't watch Jurassic Park with them. So you could do like different showings. You could do like early sometimes, late other times, rewatch the same movies, stuff like that.
And Sabrina says you did sign them.
Oh, we signed them. Okay. She would remember. She's the book person.
The book person. So that brings up a question. So do you find that most of your fans are all over the place, or, I mean, you're going to Australia and places, so are they just, I mean, I remember, go ahead. Where are they? Where are all your fans?
Yeah, I think it's pretty typical. Like there's that podcast, The Feed by Libsyn, where they talk about like a lot of general podcast metrics every week. And ours it seems like once you get to a certain size, everything just kind of averages out. And it's basically like most podcasts are biggest in the US, especially if you're based in the US. And then after that, if it's an English speaking podcast, it basically just follows like the other English speaking countries. So Canada, the UK, and Australia are like the three other big ones. And then you get, there are English speakers in Germany, and we have listeners in the Netherlands and stuff, but they're much smaller numbers. But yeah, since it's a niche, our niche is dinosaurs. That's global, right? Like there are people interested in dinosaurs all over the world. And I think that's true about most podcast stuff. Like if you have a podcast about Star Wars, there's people all over the world. It's just wherever they happen to be.
Are there a lot of Star Wars podcasts?
There's got to be.
Got to be. Like just like ones on niching down into Star Wars, like Tribbles or something.
There are several Jurassic Park podcasts that are just about Jurassic Park, and that's it.
And if you talk to those guys,
yeah, in the early days of our podcast, we did a few crossovers because it's a great way to grow your audience, is doing crossovers with similar stuff like that. And
that's awesome.
It's not like the same thing. You don't really, I don't think in general, you really have to worry about losing your audience to another podcast, because most podcast listeners listen to a bunch of them. But I could see if it was just like another carbon copy, it's like the exact same thing we're doing. But with that, it's different enough that you just end up sharing your audience, which is awesome.
And that's interesting. I was thinking too about you guys, like, so you have physical stuff to sell. Have you thought about doing that dynamic ads kind of thing?
Yeah, we do. We switched to Art19.
Oh, you are on Art19 now.
Yeah, they are great. I highly recommend them. We switched to them, I think in March or so. It ended up going through. And then it took me a little while to figure out dynamic ads. Now I'm going back and going through, like Heather was talking about, you got to go through and take out all the stale ads and put in the insertion points and all that stuff. But it's super helpful because literally with these watch parties, all you have to do is like one click and you can add a pre-roll to every single episode and say, real quick, I just want to say on, May 15th, we're going to be watching this movie at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Join our Discord if you want to watch with us.
Yeah, that seems to me the power of that. I mean, just for audience building, like that, besides the ad stuff, it's just like your community building that way.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I have a client that I was trying to show Sean's, because he said something about the COVID thing right at the beginning. And I thought that was so great. Like it was very personable. Like I felt, good. And then I had the client, I was like, oh, go check out the beginning. Of course, it didn't change. He changed it, and it was like promoting some other podcast now. But it was neat. I think it's a great tool for building community around your niche. We have to get those guys to come in and talk, the Art19. Actually, I'm talking to them tomorrow about coming in and doing a talk about, their service.
They are great. I wish we had switched even earlier, so I didn't have to go back and change all these ads.
Interesting, yeah. And then Jim McDonald and I have been talking both this week about like looking at all the other dynamic ad, like Omni, and just to see how maybe do a little, hey, this is what the different people do. But it's nice to know that you guys are involved, because we wanted to talk to people that are actually using them too, besides just talking to the sales guys. But fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, we met them. We met them at it was called Oakland Podcasters Association at the time, California Podcasters Association.
Whatever, yeah. At one of our meetings, huh?
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah. I've talked to them. They're right down the street from where we were meeting.
Their support's been really good too, because there were a couple little hiccups, as there always are when you switch services, and they really fix stuff real quick, a lot faster than some of the other bigger names out there might.
Did you go in and actually edit all your shows?
Oh man, I've done like 5 of them. I have 280 more to do.
Oh man. Wow, that's something you might want to farm out to other people, but I guess you need to do it, huh?
I don't know. I should. Sabrina's always trying to convince me to farm more out, and she's right, but I always resist.
She seems to be smarter than you. I don't know. Yeah. So, and then one other thing that I was interested in too is, like you said, that like do contests, do the watch parties.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of contests have you guys done? Have you done some contests? Or?
Yeah, we did. Well, I guess we did a sweepstakes giveaway, which is a little bit different.
It's a good thing though.
But we gave away a dinosaur sculpture. We did. We had this advertiser for a while who makes dinosaur sculptures, and he proposed, like, rather than paying for some episode advertisements one time, what if he like gave us a dinosaur sculpture that we could give away instead? Or maybe I proposed it. I can't remember, but it worked okay. It was, I forget how we structured it, but it was something like, you had to listen for a keyword in the episode in order to get the thing or something. Or I just said, like, in the beginning of the episode, this is the way to get it. Oh, it was a different hyperlink. That's what it was. So it was like, go to bit.ly/something every episode. That way you had to actually listen to it in order to enter. I didn't want just a bunch of random people entering. Right. Yeah. And then we mailed this dinosaur sculpture to somebody. So
very cool.
They liked it. I don't think I'd really do that type again. I think I'd do something more interactive, where like I'd have everybody make a piece of dinosaur art and then have people vote on the winner or something like that.
And and one of the things I wanted to ask you too about you did a cross promotion with the Hellbent from Horror, and I wondered how did you actually do that for that Hellbent for Horror is Scott Bradley, who comes to our meetings a lot of the time, and I when I heard that I thought that was very interesting, because I'd like more of the people in the group to be trying to do that with each other. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
How did that work? So he's a horror podcast, and you guys talk about dinosaurs. So I thought, like, how'd that work?
Yeah, so our show is about dinosaurs, but I guess there's two. Oh man, there's a lot of podcasts that are about like paleontology, just generally, and so they're very science heavy, and that's all they do, which is great because it's a great way to learn about science. We do that too, but then in our interview section, we tend to branch out into like all sorts of different dinosaur things that people are doing. So we've had people on that, like, there's a guy who studied in Indonesia, this group of people who live with chickens, and they have dances that are like ritual dances with those chickens, sort of like mimicking the way the chickens move. And he interpreted that into a dinosaur dance, because dinosaurs are closely related to chickens. So they likely moved similarly. And he put on like a stage performance, and it's amazing. So we had him on. We've had like all sorts of different artists on, and just like we like seeing all the different ways that dinosaurs stuff gets out there. And that's so awesome. So with Hellbent for Horror, what we did was Jurassic Park is really a horror movie. It's like, it's not a science movie. It's about dinosaurs eating people, basically. And so usually when we talk about Jurassic Park on the show, we talk about it as like, oh, this dinosaur is slightly inaccurate, or oh, that T-Rex is, like really awesome and it really could crush like it did in Jurassic Park or whatever. But we wanted to explore it from a new angle. And like he's an expert in horror movies. So we're like, okay, yeah, tell us about the horror aspect of things and like why they chose dinosaurs and how that works. And he did a really phenomenal job, like finding all these connections. And then we went on his show. And I forget what all we talked about on his show. I think we talked about just like different dinosaur horror stuff, but from a different angle that would fit his show better. So
and he might be the person if you need more dinosaur movies to talk to. Like
that's true.
He might know some other ones you never thought about. There must be some.
I need to ask him.
Random horror dinosaur things.
Yeah. By far the best way I think to grow your audience is find podcasts that are sort of have something in common with yours, that do interviews or have some mechanism for cross promoting, and to do that, because the best, you want podcasters because podcast listeners are going to listen to your podcast if they like the way it sounds on a different podcast. And it's always hard to see in the metrics, like, oh, we did an advertisement, did it move our numbers at all? Usually it just looks like noise. But when we go on another podcast, we always see like a little bump, and usually you hold on to a little bit of that audience. So yeah,
that's great.
Highly recommended.
That's great. Okay, well, thanks so much, Garret. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting to everybody. And I guess we should sign off and say thank you. And
all righty. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you on Tuesday, the next Tuesday. I should probably have written that down. But I think Chris Curran is the next person coming on. He's going to talk about doing editing stuff. So that should be fun.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
See ya.
See you later.